Hey everyone, this is Mike. Today we're finally doing the 10k subscribers Q&A video that I've been teasing for the last week or something. I collected a bunch of questions over on Discord, and today we're basically just going to be reading through them, giving you some answers. Now, of course, if you like this kind of Q&A content, I actually quite really enjoy making it. Make sure to let me know in the comments down below, because maybe I can make this into a monthly thing, or at least something that comes back on a regular. Just let me know what you think about it. Maybe I'll set up a channel in the Discord specifically for that, so that we can keep doing it. Of course, if you have any more questions that you would like to ask me, you can always ask them in the comments of the video, or just on the Discord channel itself, because I just have a general question channel over there as well that I frequently respond to as well, of course, whenever people ask me questions in there. Now, of course, before I get into the video, I want to just give you a big thank you. 10,000 subscribers, that's a lot of people, and if it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. So if you're a Patreon supporter, somebody that subbed to me on Twitch, or if you're just watching my videos, liking them, giving comments and all of that stuff, I just want to give you a big thank you, because of course all of that support really means a lot to me, and without you guys I just wouldn't really be sitting here right now. So with that out of the way, with the little intro out of the way, let me open up my Discord, and then we can basically get started. I also got an extra question earlier today, which I'm also going to be introducing in here. It wasn't asked for the Q&A, but I had already closed down the channel at that point. And it was still a question that I think would be good to be answered in like this style of format, so that everybody has seen it, because it's about the Ilya strat, which is of course a very debated topic. So let's start off with the first question. I'm going to try to basically put all of the questions at the bottom of the video as well, so that you guys can read the full questions as well. So, first one, what is your favorite game? I think this one goes without saying, Final Fantasy XIV. It is by far my most played game. If I quickly go and check, I have about 6,577 hours in the game at the moment, which of course some of those were AFK as well, but it is by far my most played game. I think my second most played game is Closers Online, which comes in at, I can also quickly check for this, about 1,800 hours. So Final Fantasy is more than 3 times my most played game, so that is why it is my favorite. What kind of hobbies do you have? So of course gaming is my biggest hobby by far. I'm pretty addicted to it, I guess you could say. Outside of that, I also really like to read. For example, as you can see behind me, a bunch of books. In front of me, there's even more of them. If you've seen the 5k sub video where I give you a tour of my room, then basically I really like reading. I have a lot of different books. I also read webtoons every day, or almost every day, like linewebtoon.com, I believe it is, where basically they get updated every week, and I just have something to read to start my day. So that's kind of usually how I start my day. I open up all of my social media, then I read something as well. When it comes down to sports, there's 2 things I like to do. One is skateboarding, which at the moment I can't really do because of the whole pandemic. The new skate park that opened up like literally a few months ago, right before the pandemic kind of broke out. So I've been there like once, and then they closed it down during the pandemic, so I can't really do normal skateboarding anymore. What I still do though is I have an electric skateboard. It's called an Evolve GTX, which at this point is like 3 years old, I think. But I've been riding Evolve electric skateboards for, I would want to say 4 or 5 years maybe at this point, which they're probably one of the best investments that I've made so far. They're pretty expensive, because I think the current one that I have was about 1,500 euros, which would be a lot of money for a skateboard, as most people would say, which it really is. But it goes about 35-40 kilometers an hour. I use it to literally get anywhere. Whenever it's not raining, I ride my skateboard, because it's just really chill. It gets me on where I need to be very quickly as well. So if I need to go grocery shopping, visiting my parents, or somebody else that is like in the vicinity, where I could drive the skateboard, because of course it has limited range compared to going with like a car or something. But I really like skateboarding. There is also one hobby that I haven't done in a long time, but I would like to get back to, and that is kiting. Back in the day, I used to kite with a flyboard, so on land, which is basically a skateboard with very thick wheels to go on the sand. But I would really like to get into kite surfing, because I've always thought it was really cool. Right now, the equipment that I have is not good enough, because at this point I've grown so much compared to before, because I used to be always a really tiny guy, and now I'm, well, average size, I guess you could say. But yeah, kite surfing is something that I would like to do again. Well, I haven't kite surfed yet, but kiting would be something I would like to get back into again. I just haven't really had much time and opportunity to do it so far, but that would be something that I'd like to get back into. Outside of that, I don't really have that many different hobbies anymore. I just play way too many video games, to be honest. Then Clem asks, why are you so cute? I don't know. Am I cute? I don't really consider myself to be cute. Are you a weeb? I wouldn't say I am. I used to be a weeb. Like back in the day when I was in high school, I watched a crap load of anime. That was pretty much the only hobby I had back then, just watch anime all the time. But nowadays, as I've grown older, I tend to prefer like live action movies or live action series like on Netflix and stuff. I don't really watch that much anime anymore. I still read manga every now and then, as you can see. But outside of that, I don't really like watch much anime anymore, and I wouldn't really consider myself a weeb anymore either, even though sometimes I guess you could say Closer's kind of a weeb game. But yeah, I don't think so. Do you think Lalas are evil? Nah, we're just cute little people that have very cute smiles, and we're totally not scheming anything behind them. What is the hardest raid to blind proc in your opinion? That would probably have to be Ultima Weapon. Now, not because the fight itself is crazy hard, but because of all of the hidden mechanics and the amount of reprog that you have to do for that fight. So, first of all, you can do the 3 first primals normally and never know that you have to awaken them to get through the La Habrea phase in that fight. So, once you get to La Habrea, you're like, we need 4 limit breaks for this. How are we gonna do this? And that is where you figure out that you need to awaken all 3 of the primals. So that is the first like mechanic that you have to figure out right there. The second one is that the Garuda phase is incredibly important for the rest of the fight, because I believe pretty much every trio or every ultimate inside the Ultima phase requires you to have meso high stacks. Like I think in the first one you need a healer to have it. Oh no, you need the range to have it, or the caster. In the second one you need the healer to have it, and then in the final phase you need, like during suppression, you need another one. So every time that you went further into the Ultima phase of the weapons refrain, you would have to go back to Garuda and be like, okay, we need to change this because we need a healer to have a meso high stack, or we need both of our healers to have a meso high stack. Then we need an extra one on a DPS, maybe we need to keep one on a tank. So you basically have to reprog a lot of that fight, and every time you saw new mechanics, you're always keeping in the back of your head, please let us not have to go back to Garuda to get the meso highs different again. So probably the weapons refrain. Rijo asks, who's your favorite German? I'm actually not quite sure if I have a specific favorite German, but if I had one, you're definitely on the list, Rijo. Then, what were some of your characteristics you found to be beneficial for your time progging raids in 14, for example, focus, commitment, and likewise, what were some that you considered to be a bit of a hindrance and something you had to work on, for example, impatience, negativity? When it comes down to beneficial characteristics, it would definitely be consistency. I am someone that, or at least I'd like to believe that I am someone that is relatively consistent when it comes down to executing mechanics. Once I learn a mechanic, I am pretty consistent at executing it as well. And that is one of the most important things that you can have as a progression raider, because you might need DPS at the end of the day, but when you are going through a fight, it is much more important that you can see to the next mechanic as much as possible, so that you can start progressing or figuring out that next mechanic as well. So consistency is definitely the one trait that I think is the most important when it comes down to progressing raids in Final Fantasy. When it comes down to commitment, that's kind of an up and down side, because if I know that a group is not capable of clearing the content, I'm also very quick to leave. For example, when it came down to Unending Coil, UCOP, as well as the weapons refrain, I was in a group that I did Savage with at that point when I started progressing those 2 raids, and I also left both of those groups because I knew they just weren't up to the task. And I believe up to this date, neither of those 2 groups have cleared those fights either. Once I did get into a group that I knew was gonna be able to clear, like for example on UCOP, I spent 2.5 months semi-hardcore progressing UCOP for that entire time, like 2.5 months with the same group. It was draining, it was mentally exhausting, but I stuck with the group because I knew that in the end of the day, we would be able to clear it. Same thing went for Alexander Ultimate. I was really not happy with how my progression went for that one. The group was incredibly inconsistent, but I knew that we would be able to clear it eventually, and that is why I decided to stay with them. So commitment, if I know that there is a chance for us to clear it, I'll stick with the group and I'll be committed to them. If I know that it is not the case, I'm also very quick to leave. So kind of an up and a downside. When it comes down to hindrances, impatience and negativity, you basically just sum both of them up. If something is not going the way I want it to be, I usually get kind of depressed pretty easily. and I tend to show it as well. I am I'm not necessarily a negative person, but when things aren't going our way, like for example on Living Liquid, if we wipe to Jackdaws five times in a row on our 600 pull of that phase at that point, then I get down really quickly, and I also show that. When it comes down to impatience, I am someone that likes to clear fights relatively quickly because I know I am capable of it myself, because I am a relatively consistent player, and because of that I kind of want other people to kind of like keep up with me, so to speak. I know that I cause a lot of wipes myself, but in like the spur of the moment, I can get impatient and negative quite a bit, and it shows. And it's definitely the biggest downside to raiding with me that sometimes happens. It's definitely something that I have to work on going into the future as well, and I really hope to get better at it, to at least hide it a little bit better. Then, what is your favorite class and why? Very easy answer, Gunbreaker. I love this job for two reasons. It is a tank, which is my favorite role in the game. I don't know why tank is my favorite role, I just feel like I resonate with it the most. The reason why I take Gunbreaker is because it still feels like I'm playing a melee DPS. I started out the game on Ninja, which is a melee DPS, and Gunbreaker kind of feels like the best of both worlds. You're still playing a tank, you have all the responsibilities of a tank, but you also have a very active rotation that you're playing with as well, so you kind of feel like a melee DPS, and Gunbreaker is basically just a really cool combination of both of these. Then, how many languages do you know? I actually know 4 languages. Of course, I'm speaking English right now, which is my third language that I learned. My native language is Dutch, because I'm from Belgium. Belgium is also a bilingual country, so I also know some French. Now, don't ask me to speak French, because it's been a very long time that I've actually had to speak it or write it, so I'm very rusty. It's been about like 7 years, I think, since I last used French. But technically I know it. I can hold simple conversations with people if really need be. And I also, later down the line, about 4 years ago, I studied Japanese, because I was a weeb back in the day. I was kind of more drawn towards Japan as well, and I wanted to go on a vacation to Japan as well. I've been there 3 times now, but I decided to study some Japanese for it. I actually started studying Japanese on accident, so I wanted to learn how to play shogi, which is Japanese chess. And the YouTube channel that I was watching, that was teaching kind of like how to play the game, also had a tutorial on how to read easy Japanese, which is hiragana and katakana. And when I learned how to read that, I was like, oh, would I be able to read an actual Japanese manga? So I bought this manga right here, Zetsue no Tempest, which was definitely not a good choice, because this is kind of like a higher level of Japanese than you would give to a beginner. But I was like, okay, I can read some words here or there. What if I were to actually study it? And then I studied Japanese for a little bit over than a year. At some point, I knew like 2,500 different kanji, which at this point, like I haven't used Japanese in the last 3 years almost. So I'm definitely very rusty. But if I were to like brush up a little bit, spend maybe a month studying again, I would definitely be back up to par to being able to speak Japanese, hold a simple conversation. As I mentioned, I've been to Japan 3 times. And knowing some Japanese has definitely helped out quite a bit, like navigating the subway over there, or just like asking for directions, that kind of stuff. So yeah, 4 languages. If you could change one thing to Final Fantasy XIV, be it big or small, what would it be? I would actually change 2 things. So first of all, a better tutorial. I think that the Hall of the Novice is a very good thing, but I also think it's way too basic, and it's also optional as far as I know. I would really love for them to make a tutorial that is a little bit more intense, maybe make it kind of like the job quests that we have right now, but be like, okay, here is a new skill that you acquired, let's do a solo instance, explain how that skill works, and let you use it a little bit, because that way, when you're in a dungeon as a tank, you'll use cooldowns, because you're like, okay, this little tutorial told me to use cooldowns when I'm tanking a lot of different mobs, because for example, if you don't use cooldowns in that single player instance, you might die or something. You wouldn't also have healers that don't do damage, because they're like, I'm a healer, I only need to heal. No, you're also supposed to do damage when you're not healing at that time. And when it comes down to playing a melee DPS, teach them that there's positionals. I made some videos in the past, and I've seen people be like, oh, I've been a samurai main for a year and I didn't know there were positionals to my job. And I'm like, well, that's something that's very important to know, and also makes a big difference when it comes down to dealing damage. So I think a better tutorial would definitely be something that would help the general player base for the game quite a bit. Something for me personally would be more high-end light party content. I'm someone that really enjoys extreme trials, savage raids, ultimates, that kind of stuff, but you always need 8 people for those, and I really enjoy playing with a smaller circle of people. For example, when it comes down to Destiny 2, another MMO FPS that I play, I really enjoy raiding in that game, but you always need 6 people for that, and I mainly play Destiny with 2 other people, a friend of mine and his brother, and exactly 3 people is what you need to do dungeons in Destiny. Dungeons in Destiny are not like dungeons in Final Fantasy. They're basically a simpler version of a raid environment, because you have different encounters, you have a very big environment that you're going through as well. It's basically like a raid, but you have a little bit simpler mechanics, and you also need 3 people instead of 6. So I'd really like to see something similar in Final Fantasy, whether it be more difficult dungeons, kind of like Mythic Plus in World of Warcraft. Of course, I've never played World of Warcraft, but I would imagine Mythic Plus is kind of what I am asking for. Or something like Rathalos Extreme, the Monster Hunter World collaboration, really fun fight, also only requires 4 players to do, so maybe like an extreme trial for 4 people, or like a Mythic Plus dungeon. That would definitely be something that I would really enjoy, because I feel like there's not enough difficult 4-player content in the game, and I don't really consider Palace of the Dead, the deep dungeon, or like the deep dungeons, because Heaven on High is also kind of like that, to be the type of content that I would really like in for 4-player difficult content. Any predictions for the 5.4 raid tier? Not really from myself. I am very open to be surprised at this point. We've seen all of the primals, so we're not going to be getting those, I would imagine. So hopefully we can see an original boss fight, kind of like we had with Final Omega and MNF. Thought that was really cool. So I'd definitely be open to something like that. I know some friends of mine are thinking that Ultimecia is going to be this raid tier's final boss fight. So that could be it, but I'm not quite sure. I'm just open to be surprised, basically. Panacook says, I love you. I love pancakes as well. Then, White Mage, question mark. Yes, White Mage is quite fun. I do enjoy that job. Lily, will you go Banana Glam next raid tier? I hope not. If I really have to resort to going Banana Glam again to clear a fight, I think I'm just gonna hang myself. Why did you choose to roll with a tank? I asked because a friend of mine who isn't into gaming much had me explain to them what tanks, healers and DPS were. She pointed out how she knew I was a healer or a support main because of my personality meshed well with that of what a healer does. Curious to see if you feel like you share personality traits or feel that you can translate the role or responsibilities onto yourself. I chose roll with a tank because it is a role that gives you some responsibility, but also not as much responsibility as something like a healer. I also feel like every time that I don't play tank, I just find myself criticizing the tank players because of what I would have done better when it comes down to like boss positioning or not like doing 360s with the boss so that the melees can keep their positionals and that kind of stuff. I just also find it like, for example, with Gunbreaker, I can still feel like playing a melee DPS but have the responsibilities of a tank. And I don't know, I just feel drawn to the role. I quite enjoy playing it. Whether or not I have personality traits that would make me like want to play a tank, I'm not quite sure. I think it's much easier to ask someone else if, like, for example, I were to have any personality traits that would make me be a tank player, because I feel like it's kind of difficult to recognize that for yourself. So yeah. What do you think the next expansion will need to do in order to surpass Shadowbringers in terms of fight, story, balance, or anything else? For me personally, I think Shadowbringers has been a really great expansion when it comes down to the quality of content that we have gotten. Story has never been better, especially with like some of the cutscenes that we're getting as of late. We can really see the improvements right there. In terms of fights, I think the fights have been really good as well. Balance has almost never been better either. The only thing I can complain about is the ranged physical DPS lacking behind a little bit. But outside of that, balance is pretty good, like disregarding how the playstyle of some certain jobs might be. If there is something that they would have to improve upon, I would just say more content. This might be because of the whole pandemic and the 3-month delay we got on patch 5.3. But I feel like the game is a little bit empty compared to what we had before in Heavensward or in Stormblood. Back in Heavensward we had 2 dungeons per patch, then in Stormblood they wanted to experiment a little bit more, so they were like, okay, every odd numbered patch we're cutting a dungeon but putting in a new type of content, which in that case was Ultimate. But right now they've cut the dungeon in the odd number patches, they've cut the dungeon in the even number patches, And I don't really feel like there's any content or new content to make up for that, because of course this expansion also doesn't have Deep Dungeon. So yeah, I think just having a little bit more content, not much, but hopefully like more. Again, it might be because of the pandemic that it feels more empty than it really is. But yeah, I would just like to see a little bit more content. Might also be because I just love playing Final Fantasy and I would just like to have more content for my favorite game. But yeah, more content. Woollyram asks, obvious question, but what is the first game that you remember playing? What are some games, one of each genre you enjoyed? It's going to be a long list. Which you consider formative. I'm not quite sure if there's any games that I really feel like formed me. So I'm not really going to be able to answer that question. And last but not least, do you play board games and or pen and paper role-playing games? So the last question is really easy. I don't. I've never really been into Dungeons and Dragons. I've been asked to join a group once, but that just never really like happened. So I don't really play them. When it comes down to the first game I remember playing, that is either going to be Pokemon Fire Red on the Game Boy, or it is going to be Super Mario Kart, or Mario Kart I think it was called back then, or Mortal Kombat on the Nintendo 64. Now, when it comes down to some of the games that I enjoy of each genre, that's a very long list. So of course, MMOs, Final Fantasy, shooters, Destiny 2, technically also kind of an MMO, but I really enjoy it. I'm going to just really quickly open up my Steam to cheat a little bit. Platformer, Celeste, roguelike, probably Wizard of Legend, MOBA at the moment League of Legends, but hopefully sometime in the next few years Dawngate is gonna make a return, which is gonna be under a new name, Shrine of Amana. But Dawngate was my favorite MOBA. At the moment I play League of Legends the most, although I still enjoy Dota 2 quite a bit as well, so kind of a mixed bag right there. When it comes down to like, what are you calling it, Metroidvanias, I really like Ori, both of the Ori games. Will of the Wisps, probably the better one there. I really enjoy Hollow Knight too, but I think Ori still gets my preference right there. Did I say platformers yet? Which would be Celeste. When it comes down to side-scrolling games, Closers Online, fighting games, Skullgirls, and ARPGs, Lost Ark. I'm probably gonna be missing a lot of genres here. Probably missing a lot of games as well, but that's my list for now. You're going to play any Soulsborne games? Oh, there we have another one. Soulsborne, Sekiro. I'm not quite sure I'm going to be playing any of the new Soulsborne games that are going to be coming out. I generally don't really play the genre that much either, although I do quite enjoy it. I played Lords of the Fallen when that came out. Did quite enjoy that one. Sekiro I adore. I played through all 5 of the different endings, I think. I got really addicted when that game came out, and if there was ever to be a Sekiro 2, I would definitely play it as well, because I thought it was a great game. First Final Fantasy game, that would be Final Fantasy Dissidia for the PlayStation Portable. I actually haven't played that many Final Fantasy games. I played Dissidia, I played 14, after that I played 15 and the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and that's it. I didn't really play that many Final Fantasy games before getting into 14. I will probably play Final Fantasy 16 when that comes out, and like the rest of the Final Fantasy VII remakes as well, but I'm not quite sure if I'm gonna go back to play older Final Fantasy games, maybe when they get a remake in the future. We'll see about that. What kind of jobs would you like to see in the next 14 expansions? First of all, a new healer. A lot of people were really hoping that Dancer was gonna be a healer. I have a feeling that Apothecary, or however you pronounce that, is gonna be the next healer in the next expansion. Outside of that, maybe a caster. I don't think we're getting a new tank, a new melee DPS, because we already have 4 of that role. We just got a ranged as well. If there were going to be 2 new jobs, it would be a healer and a caster, I think. What do you do in real life, or are you a full-time streamer? So I used to work in a supermarket for 5 years, out of which the last 2 years I hated my life. So I did the responsible thing and decided to quit my job before I went into a depression. So right now I am a full-time like YouTuber slash streamer, I guess you could call it, or content creator, but it's definitely not enough to pay the bills. So because of the whole pandemic that's going on is when I decided to take this serious, which is why I set up the Patreon and all of that stuff to help with support. And it's really not until the Noping people came through with a partnership or an affiliateship, whatever you want to call it, that I decided to take this as a full-time thing. Of course, right now I definitely don't make enough money to make a living from YouTube and Twitch, But because of the whole pandemic that's going on at the moment, I'm gonna like keep trying and see whether or not there is a future in this thing for me. Maybe by the end of the year, I'll decide to keep going or to stop. We'll have to wait and see for that. But I think as long as the pandemic is around, I'm just going to keep doing this as a full-time thing. And if by the end of that journey, it is something that I can continue to do, then I definitely would like to continue doing this because I really enjoy this. So yeah, right now I am a full-time streamer, YouTuber. But I will have to wait and see if it is something that I can actually do as a living going into the future as well. Because if not, of course, I'm not just going to keep doing this if I can't make enough money from it, because I'm an adult now, I'm like 25 at this point. So yeah, I need money to like get a house at some point and such. Vane asks, favorite job and least favorite job. Favorite job, Gunbreaker already said why before. Least favorite job is a really difficult question to answer, because I like pretty much all the jobs in this game. If I really had to give one, I'd probably say Paladin, but I still like Paladin as well, so it's really difficult to answer like the question of what is my least favorite. Moving on, how to stay motivated in long-term statics and how to stay motivated to play the same roles. Maybe also what do you do when you reach a plateau of skill increase, especially near the top end of the spectrum. When it comes down to staying motivated to stay in the same static, make sure that you find a static that has people in it that you like to play with. For example, in my current static, we don't only raid together, we sometimes do Palace of the Dead, we hunt, we do 24-man, we ask each other like, hey, does somebody want to do Experts? Or we even play other games together, like sometimes I play League of Legends with some of those people as well. Or like, for example, right now we're doing Blue Mage with a couple of people from the static and then some other people. So find people that you like to play with, that's very important. The second thing is find people that want to do the same things you do. You are not going to be happy in a static that wants to do speed kills when you don't want to do that. And the other way around as well. If you want to do speed kills and your static doesn't, you're not going to be happy there. So try to find a static of people that you enjoy playing with and find one with people that also have the same goals as you do. That way it's going to be like easy to stay with them as well. When it comes down to staying motivated to play the same role, I never really found this to be an issue. I really like playing tank. I would like to keep playing tank, so I just play tank. I usually just switch around roles quite a bit for the simple reason that I used to static hop quite a bit, especially back in the day in Stormblood. So I would just play whatever the team needed me to play for the most part. But if I really could choose, I would just always want to be a tank, so I don't really have a problem staying in the same role. If you were to stick with the same static for a very long time, and you were to get bored of the role that you are playing, just ask someone else if they want to switch with you. More often than not, people will be open to switch or to learn something new, because there's a new experience to be had. So just ask if you really want to switch roles, whether or not somebody would want to switch with you. And then also, what do I do when I reach a plateau of skill increase? Not quite sure. Like, for example, at the moment, I don't really care about my DPS anymore as much as I did before with the whole rate DPS introduction in FF logs. Getting those 99s is a lot harder as well, and you're relying a whole lot more on other people playing well, and also a little bit on RNG, getting lucky with crit luck. So I don't really care about it too much. Something that I would maybe like recommend you do is mapping your GCDs. If it's possible, of course, like for example, some things like a black mage or a red mage, you can't really map your GCDs because you're playing with procs. But when it comes down to playing a tank, playing a healer, map your GCDs to the fight when it comes down to what you're going to be using where are you going to use your cooldowns when it comes down to a tank, where are you going to use what healing stuff when it comes down to a healer. Do those kind of things. If you really want to improve up, like further than that again, look at what the best players are doing and see if what they are doing works for you as well. Outside of that, I don't really think I have any more tips for that. Then, where are you from? I just like your accent. I'm from Belgium, said this before. A lot of people actually think I'm from Russia because of my name, especially when I was playing StarCraft 2. Oh yeah, StarCraft, RTS, there we go. Another one on the list. But yeah, a lot of people when I played StarCraft thought I was Russian just because of the name. I still get that sometimes, but I'm from Belgium. Then Tay asks, who is your favorite static member and why is it Kosh? For the main reason, he's just the clown of the static. Every time I feel down, every time the atmosphere goes kind of sour, Kosh will say something completely stupid and I just lose my shit. Like, I need to wind up my fan again so that my PC has some cooling. Or I'm gonna tape my phone to the outside of the window so that it has better reception. Like, I just lose it when he says those kind of things, and then the mood is just immediately lifted up again. And yeah, I think if Kosh wasn't in the static, I might have left a long time ago. But yeah, Kosh. You seem to have some great understanding of jobs and job design. What are your predictions for 6.0 jobs? Also, do you have any predictions or desires for the future reworks of jobs like Summoner and Monk? When it comes down to new jobs in 6.0, Apothecary, as I said before, maybe another caster as well. Outside of that, I really have no idea. When it comes down to changes for Summoner and Monk, I don't actually think they're going to rework Summoner. I'm not quite sure if they said that. Right now I think this current Summoner is pretty fun to play. If they were to change anything to it, get rid of Aetherflow, because that thing doesn't really have any business being in the Summoner rotation anymore, as it's kind of like tacked on from previous expansions. And make Bahamut like Phoenix is right now. I really think the Phoenix summon with the Phoenix Trance also summoning Phoenix is really cool, and right now Dreadworm Trance and the Bahamut summon are kind of like separated, so just make that the same as with Phoenix. I think that would be a really cool change. As for Monk changes, what they're going to be doing to that, what I would like to see for that, I'm actually going to be making a video for that, hopefully later this week. So I'm going to be basically answering your question in a whole separate video of its own, if you do not mind. Nuo asks, am I in a YouTube video right now? You sure are. Then, what is your favorite Final Fantasy XIV raid tier? This is a really difficult question to answer, because there are a lot of different fights amongst different raid tiers that I enjoy. If I really had to pick one, probably Sigmascape. The first two fights are a little bit on the easier side. Like for example, Phantom Train, I wasn't a big fan of either. Chadernuk is probably too easy as like a second Savage fight, but Guardian I thought was really fun because there's some RNG in there, and God Kefka is probably my favorite fight in the game ever. So yeah, probably Sigmascape if I had to choose a tier, just because God Kefka was a great fight. Then moving on, if I want to be a member of a static raid team but I can't find any and I don't know where to start, my FC already has a consistent raid team, I can't get in anywhere, I play DPS and tank, if you have any advice it would be appreciated. When it comes down to finding a static, I usually used CRC, Chaos Recruitment Center, which right now is called European Recruitment Center ever since there was the data center split. But of course that only works when you're on Europe. When it comes down to just finding a static in general, there would be three things you could do. Advertise yourself in Party Finder. You can also look for statics there sometimes, although Party Finder isn't really being used for that as much anymore. There is a Final Fantasy XIV recruitment subreddit, where you can just like write yourself an application of like, I am this, I'm looking for this, contact me, or you can like go look for statics that are looking on there as well. And then the Balance Discord also has recruitment channels if I'm not mistaken, so that would be another place where you could go and look for a static. Then, which is your favorite Ultimate fight, and do you prefer Savage or Ultimate? First in difficulty, second in terms of fight design. Favorite Ultimate fight would probably have to be Alexander Ultimate, for the simple reason that it asks you to do different things than you would normally be used to. For example, Living Liquid asks you to control DPS. You need to make sure Living Liquid and the Liquid Hand stay close to each other in terms of HP percentages, and you also need to control your DPS on the Jagged Dolls. Do too much DPS, they explode. Don't do enough DPS, they explode, and both will wipe you. When it comes down to the second phase of Brute Justice and Cruise Chaser, they ask you to be really precise with movement. Now, movement has always been a thing in Final Fantasy XIV when it comes to high-end raids, but never really taking into consideration what the other people around you are doing. In the second phase of Alexander Ultimate, you really need to know what all of the other party members are going to be doing at any given time, because you're not allowed to touch each other for the most part, and if you touch the wrong person, you're most likely gonna wipe because your Nisis are killing each other, or the Nisi disappears or it goes on the wrong person, and then when Gavel resolves, like, you just wipe. So that phase is really cool. Third phase I didn't like as much, but Wormhole is a really cool mechanic. And then the final phase of Alexander Ultimate I thought was just sublime. The Fate Calibration, even though it might not be a very difficult mechanic, I thought was just incredibly unique and super cool, that we are seeing the future and that we have to prevent ourselves from dying by reading in what is happening into the future. Also fits in really well with the lore of Alexander, because he is the primal of time. So it's really cool that he's showing you the future, and then you have to like make sure that you don't die by seeing what happened there, which is probably why that fight is my favorite Ultimate. Do I prefer Savage or Ultimate? Probably have to say Savage because it's a lot easier to prog. For example, 2 of my Ultimate progressions took very long, UCOP being an incredibly long progression, and it's very draining to do raids like that. Whereas with Savage is a week where you go really hard, and then you're basically done, or at least me and the teams that I've done Savage within the last few years, last few months, I guess we could say, like the last 2 tiers really. I prefer Savage for that because it doesn't take as long to progress through. When it comes down to satisfactions from clearing, Ultimate, 100%. But in general, I think I prefer Savage fights over Ultimate. But that is also a good thing because Ultimate only you get that once per year pretty much. So I enjoy both. Like they both have their ups and downs. When it comes down to difficulty, in terms of fight design, I think I prefer both of them for Ultimate. I like to challenge myself from time to time, and Ultimate really is the ultimate challenge for that. And the fight design is usually very unique, as I just talked about with Alexander Ultimate. It really asks you to do things that you're not used to doing in Final Fantasy XIV, which I think is really cool about it. But yeah, I think I still prefer doing Savage fights because they're just easier, more accessible to do with other players as well. Whereas with Ultimate, you really need a static for it. It usually takes a few weeks, few months in certain cases in order to clear them. So it's mainly the time investment that I don't like about Ultimate, but everything else I do enjoy about it. So kind of like two-sided answer, I guess. What changes do you want to see come to Summoner next expansion? Already talked about this. Get rid of Aetherflow and make Bahamut like Phoenix. And then our final, well actually no, because I'm going to add an extra question towards the end here as well. What do you think is going to be the next raid tier / ultimate? When it comes down to the next raid tier, I have no idea. As I mentioned, Ultimecia could be in there because some of my friends are speculating that, but I'm really open to anything there. When it comes down to the new ultimate, I am hoping for Warring Triad. Sephiroth, Sophia, and Zervan. I really enjoyed those fights. Were my first primals in the game as well, so I'd like to see an ultimate of them. If not those, then maybe Torden. Torden probably would be a really great ultimate as well with the Knights of the Round. So either of those could be a really cool ultimate. So yeah, that is that. Now I'm going to add an extra question in here because that one was asked earlier today on the Discord. And I thought it would actually fit really well in here. So, I know that you get this question often, probably too often, but how do you feel about the Ilias thread? It's even in a video, but give me the updated feelings if possible. Love your content, by the way. So, when it comes down to the Ilias thread, I have gotten a lot of hate for it. I've also gotten a lot of praise for it. Now, when it comes down to the strat itself, it is not a good strat for a Final Fantasy strat, because in Final Fantasy, all people care about is their DPS. Ilias thread is very bad for DPS. On the other hand, I do think it is a pretty good strat to get through the mechanic, because it doesn't require much brain cells. If you want to do something like Ayatori or Sharingan, apparently is a strat as well that we have been doing, like those require you to think a little bit more. So when it comes down to just getting through the mechanic, not caring about your DPS, I think it's a good strategy because it's very easy to remember, it's very easy to execute. When it comes down to doing log runs, speed kills, it's total ass, because the strat is very bad for uptime, and for something like that, Ayatori, Sharingan is much better. Of course, like me and my group do Sharingan as well right now. We thought we were doing Ayatori, but apparently we're doing the adjusted version, which is called Sharingan, which I learned this morning. But yeah, so basically, I think the strat is good if you want to just get through the mechanic, not caring about DPS. If you do care about DPS, you shouldn't do it, and you should do Sharingan or Ayatori. There was also somebody that asked me to marry me in these questions before, but apparently they have deleted their answer, so shame on you. Now, anyways, those are all of the questions that were asked. I think this video is coming up to like 40 minutes at this point, so that is pretty much going to be it for today. If you like these kind of like contents, let me know in the comments down below. Maybe I can make this into like a monthly thing or something like that, because I do quite enjoy answering people's questions. Of course, you can always ask them in the comments, you can ask them on my Discord if you want to do so, and then I'll of course immediately get back to you instead of like a week later in a video like this. But anyways, that's gonna be it for me. I want to thank you for watching. I want to just thank you again for 10,000 subscribers. It's quite a milestone, and right now we're just moving on to the next milestone, which is probably going to be like 15 or 20k. We'll see whenever I do another one of these like appreciation videos. So yeah, that's gonna be it for me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.